something where you're actively searching for something, you know?
Oh, peeking around the dark range.
Exactly.
Hey, Rob, how's it going?
Great.
How you doing? Rob Edwards. Yeah, thanks for talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
A lot of viewers will know your work as a screenwriter from stuff like Princess and the Frog, Treasure Planet, In Living Color, Fresh Prince, very storied career in TV and film, but now your latest project is a graphic novel about the life of the fascinating and way too little known still historical figure, Robert Smalls.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the tragedy, is that this guy lived this extraordinary life and just nobody knows about him. You know, you tell people, and the first question, they don't say like, well, wait, and then what did he do? They say, why don't I know about this guy? I feel honored to be the person that is going to bring that story to everybody.
Yeah. And so for those who are watching who don't know anything about Robert Smalls, tell us the short version of his story.
Well, the short version, okay, there is no short version, but he was born a slave, and his slave owner kind of raised him as his own son, and so he kind of grew up feeling fairly privileged. When he was about 23 years old, he was, during the Civil War, he was basically assigned to work on this ship, the Planter, which ferried munitions back and forth. And one night, when the white crew took off, it was 3 white crew members, 9 black, took off, they commandeered the boat. They, all their families got onto the boat and they took off. They went through 5 checkpoints, disguised as the captain, and then surrendered the ship to the Union Army that was just outside of Charleston Harbor. He then became rich because it was loaded with weapons, and so it was the biggest haul in the Civil War. He was famous for pulling this thing off. Yeah. The families of everybody, basically were free and prospered. His own family, the same. He then ran for Congress 5 times, won. He started a printing press. He started a railroad. He's the reason why we have black people in the military, because they showed courage, intelligence and strength. He's the reason why we have public schools. So, because he really, really wanted to be able to read all of his life. So that is the shortest version possible of the extraordinary life of Robert Smalls.
Yeah, and just like the way that story just like keeps going. That like when at the end, like, oh yeah, and that's why we have public schools now. What?
Yes,
it's
exactly.
amazing.
And I always think the most amazing thing he did was die of old age, because there was a target on his back the entire time. Yeah. They took the crew that had kind of left the ship and started things in motion, were taken to court, as was the owner of the ship, and there was a bounty on his head his entire life, and he became very quickly the most famous black person in the world. Which is even more tragic that nobody knows him now.
How did you decide that you were going to tell this story and that this was how you were going to tell it?
Yeah, well, actually, the story starts here in Bloomfield Hills, where a classmate of mine, a guy named David Baxter, who I'd gone to Cranbrook with, he calls me up and he says, "Hey, we got this script. We had a meme about this guy, and it was basically the story very quickly. And why don't we know who he is? Why isn't there a movie about him?" And so one of the fans of Legion M, where he was working, just wrote a script. This guy, Robert Whitehill, who's a fantastic writer. And he gave it to me and said, well, what do you think? And basically the story was well written, but it focused on the heist itself, just the taking of the Planter. And as I was reading it and then kind of going through Wikipedia and whatever, I went down the rabbit hole of like all the stuff that this guy had done. I said, well, I think that that's the beginning of the story. I think that it's about a man who is free in his heart. He becomes free, and then he does all the things that you do when you've been caged for so long. And I said, well, I hope you don't mind, but rather than just give a bunch of notes on it, I'd like to take a crack at it. I'd like to just kind of do this. And also, I think it's important that a story like this be told by a black author, as opposed to whatever. Just because it's times we live in, and also my filter is different.
Of course,
and so for me, I'm not a historian. I'm just a writer. I just write Disney movies and stuff, and and Fresh Prince. And so I took it as a character study. what kind of person would do this thing, and what was going on with his family. And I discovered actually, as I was doing it, that in a lot of ways, I was able to find things that the historians were not, because I was asking questions that they weren't. You know, I was always focused on like, well, where's the family and whatever, you know, and why would he do this rather than what did he do? Why would he do it? And so it's just been a really great journey for me.
Yeah. Well, and then since you are a screenwriter, how did you end up deciding to write it as a graphic novel rather than just a screenplay?
Well, it's interesting because I had just been into Netflix with a project, Anne Hathaway, John Baptiste, you know, a fantastic team of producers working on it. And we just kept hitting against the fact that we didn't have IP. You know, that there was no intellectual property that it was based on. It was just an original idea, and we were kind of, you know, moving through it. And my heart had been broken so many times, you know, by the kind of risk-averse world that I said, well, you know what, it's actually a good reason why they say no to these, you know, so many projects, because they're just untested, you know, in the world. And if this story is worth telling, you can tell it in any form and it will catch on.
Yeah.
So, so I said, you know, let's not go in just with the story. Let's go in with something, you know. And the books that were out there were good, not, you know, were good. The fantastic books are out there, but none of them did what I wanted to do, which was to tell a very human story about a man who wanted to make a better life for his family, who did everything he could to do that. And so I said, well, look, I'm writing the script anyway. You know, I know the story. Why don't we just make a graphic novel of it? If the graphic novel works, then we know we're in good shape. Yeah. And the graphic novel is fantastic.
Well, and now I'm curious, how different was writing a graphic novel from writing scripts?
Well, interesting for me because I started off as just at Syracuse University, where both of us went. Yeah, go Orange. I had actually started off, you know, as I was learning how to write screenplays, I was also writing short stories. So I got used to the idea of, oh, hey, this works as a short story. I was also, you know, I did a lot of stuff in the theater department. Hey, this works better as a play. This works better as a movie. And then I did stand-up and whatever, and I've done half hours and hours and movies and animation. And so you get used to the idea of filtering stories through various, you know, methods. Like how are people going to receive it?
Yeah.
And so this idea, I thought, okay, well, this guy is basically larger than life anyway. He's essentially a superhero. So why not? It's a perfect format for him. And also, like, for kids that will be hearing this story for the first time, what better way to hear it? You know, you meet people where they live.
Yeah.
You know, some people, you know, the movie. Some people, it's an app. You know, some people, it's whatever it is. It's a live stage show. But you know, I think for the kid that I most want to hear this, it's a graphic novel.
So then the graphic novel half of it, the artists you have working on this are really incredible artists. The interior illustrator, of course, has worked with Marvel. The cover designer designed the iconic Black Panther soundtrack album cover. Tell me about them.
Oh my God! Well, the best thing was that when we first started this, I said, okay, I don't know anything about graphic novels, but fortunately, I'd worked on a couple of collaborations with Dennis Cohen, the legendary Dennis. You know, so I texted him and I said, okay, I need names. You know, who do you like? And he recommended a couple of people. And then I was also working with Nicholas Draper-Ivey, the amazing cover designer. I'd been working with him on a live-action Static Shock. So so I knew him, and I knew his work, and he's just phenomenal, and he's fast and everything. So I said, hey, would you mind doing a cover for this? I think it would really set a tone with such a he has such a great way of drawing that is very, very current. You know, there's no dustiness to to what he does. And I didn't want that kind of, you know, McDonald's placemat kind of thing. I wanted something that seemed fresh. Yeah. Boom, he did a great job. Then I went down the list of the people that Dennis Cohen had given me. Everybody said yes. So we had this, you know, just embarrassment of riches. And from there, Ray Anthony Height said yes. And it was like, okay, great. Well, this is fantastic. And he and I just had a quick conversation, hit it off, and he's just been phenomenal. So yeah, once again, I always speak with the joy of waiting for somebody to read this actual story, because it's just amazing.
So it was funded with a very successful Kickstarter campaign.
Yes.
And something that you had told me that really stood out to me was how many of the contributions were people buying boxes of the comics to have sent to schools and libraries.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, it's why this, why now, right? And sometimes an idea comes to you at just the right time, and it just feels perfectly formed. The Princess and the Frog was like that. Where it's just like, okay, this is a perfect movie for this time, and this one. One of the ideas when we said, like, well, let's test the idea, let's test the market, see if, is there a reason why for 200 years nobody's told this story? Maybe nobody wants to hear the story, And so what if we just put it out there in Kickstarter, and if you build it, they will come, or maybe they won't. And we asked for, I think the ask was $10,000 to make the book, and we wound up with $156,000. Wow. So it was like, okay, well, I guess they do want to hear it. So this is a good thing. And and one of the things that Kickstarter won't allow us to do is to buy for schools. People wanted to buy boxes of them and take them to schools. Kickstarter will let you buy one and give one. So we're actually starting another campaign on the defiantproject.com website, and also on the Legion M website, for people to be able to do just that. Because I do think it's important, what better, gift, at, Black History Month or whatever, to kind of go outside, and there's a great box of these fantastic comic books. Hopefully they'll be fun to read and everything, and inspirational, life-changing, I believe. And so the spirit of people who want to do that, who want to help share this story, is really wonderful.
Yeah, and of course, getting that out there, like you had said to me, that for kids who can't learn this history in schools, they can go get their history at the comic shop.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the best thing, right? I mean, like I say, the history shouldn't be this like vegetables. It shouldn't be bitter and hard to swallow, and it makes your teeth. It should be like like candy. You should. By consuming it, to belabor it, by consuming it, it should kind of make you feel better. It should kind of give you a nice little rush. And you should, with a story like this, go like, wait a minute, this guy was 10 years old selling candy, literally selling candy. He would take a bag of candy and then sell the individuals to kids on the dock in Charleston. And then he would sell tobacco to adults. He would buy a big bag of tobacco and sell tobacco to adults at 10 years old, right? He's entrepreneurial. He's trying to buy his freedom, so he's doing all of this stuff. And then he was still a young man, 23, convincing a boat full of people to put their lives in jeopardy, to the point where they had lined the deck with gunpowder. It was loaded with munitions, but they lined the deck with gunpowder, because if it went wrong, if they didn't get through any of the 5 checkpoints, or if anybody discovered them at any time, or if the white crew woke up and found out that they, what they were doing, the whole thing was over. And they wouldn't just be tried and put in jail. They would probably terrible, terrible things would have happened to them. And so be able to convince a crew at 23, that this was the right thing to do, that takes an extraordinary person. And so I would think that if I was a kid, if I was 10, 15, or whatever, 17, 23, and I read the story, I would say, okay, that is the measure of a great man. What would it take for me to be like that? Okay, I should read this story. And then, wow, what did he do afterwards? Well, okay, public schools, whatever, the military, just proving one after the other to people that were skeptical. Even, Abraham Lincoln, it was there were no black people in the Union Army before that. And just by his courage and thoughtfulness and everything, they said, okay, this is a good idea. And that turned the war. because all of a sudden you had this just amazing amount of military, you were able to kind of tip the scales.
Wow. Yeah, it is an incredible story.
Yeah. So join your football team or whatever, whatever. Join the debate team, do something to change the world a little bit.
And so you told me a bit about like the rules that you went into writing the story with, and I thought that was really interesting.
The rules that I had for myself as I started into this were that I know how I perceive these things. When I watch movies, and there are many of them about slaves and about what they went through. A lot of them, I mean, I'm a gentle soul in a way, so they're really triggering, and they just keep you awake all night. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the story gets muddled in the whips and chains of it all, and just seeing bloody backs and that. And I said, look, I don't want to do that. That I want to tell the story. I want to tell an inspirational story and not have people, lose sleep over it. I want people to feel good after it. Yeah. So that was one thing. Like, can we get through the story without that? And can we, when we need to, can we imply it? Because when he saw that kind of thing, he was 10 years old. Mm. So the conversations, and you'll see in the graphic novel as it's depicted, it's through the mind of a 10-year-old. Mm. So he's imagining it. He is protecting himself from those memories, by imagining, but he's abstracted. I'll leave the secret, the fun of it. But he has abstracted those experiences, those memories in himself, and it's actually more impactful because when people see it, they say like, "Oh my God! Oh, I know exactly what he was going through." That is actually more painful without being disgusting. The other thing was that I really just wanted to focus on the family, just telling the story of the family all the way through, and telling the history in a fun way, right? The third thing I wanted to do was just to that when racism is depicted, it's always like, oh, look at here, look at what we got, whatever. Oh, what you doing after dark, that kind of thing, and you look around and like nobody's like that, Well, there were a handful of people who were like that, but people experience racism every day. It's just a different thing, and sometimes it comes off like in Get Out, where it's like, hey, voted for Obama 3 times, whatever, that is a form of it, and or somebody will say like, look, I like you, whatever, but you can't marry my daughter because the neighbors, whatever, or we would love to have you in our club, but just it's going to make some people will be uncomfortable, and that's how you experience it is with a nice face. And so one thing that we're doing, and one thing you can do very much in graphic novels, is that when people do that, their shadows change, and their eyes change a little bit, and the color scheme changes just a bit. So it throws you just off a touch. Something is happening inside of this person. This person is empowering themselves with this other thing. And that's the way, hopefully, a modern interpretation of an old thing that again, I hope will resonate with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that what you're saying about like the way that you use the very visual medium of the graphic novel to do that sounds extremely, extremely cool.
Yeah,
for sure.
Exactly. Well, the first word is graphic, right? So you gotta, and with that, those are the challenges. I mean, that's the fun of writing for animation too. Like with Treasure Planet, there's big questions of, hey, well, if this guy has 8 eyes, what do binoculars look like for him? And if this is 2 people, then okay, great. Well, how do they work together? And well, maybe the guy who looks like a crab, he works up in the up in the sails. And those kinds of things, those kind of flights of fancy with imagination, absolutely you can do in this. And so you give yourself liberty to tell a very grounded story in a very graphic way.
And then so gotta ask. So then going down the road,
yes.
Are there plans to maybe do like a film or a series or some kind of adaptation after the graphic novel? Right.
Well, that's the plan has always been. Graphic novel first, get groundswell about the idea, and then take that out and say, hey, look, we have this great thing. We'd like to make a movie based on it, even though it was kind of retroactively done. looks like it's happening, and it looks like it's happening in an extraordinary way, where people are coming to us now, which is exactly, you know, in my wildest dreams, that's what I was hoping would happen, is that, you know, we would put it out there. There'd be a nice little, you know, people would talk about the Kickstarter. People would talk about the amount of artists that we got on the project, and some of the people would, you know, kind of be doing lazy circles around it, and, you know, hopefully talent after the actor strike is over, talent will start dropping in.
Yeah.
And you know, directors have been talking to us, producers, banks, you know. So I think that its afterlife will be wonderful. The two things we're talking about is, are we going to do it as a feature and try to tell the entire life, you know, in one feature, or can we do it in a longer form thing, or do we do a hybrid of that? Because as many stories as there are with just Robert Smalls, the other people that he came in contact with during Reconstruction are also thrilling, you know, and I want to be able to tell those stories, you know, and so who knows? But the future looks bright.
Nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I certainly saw on the Kickstarter campaign that some of the producers you had on, like the amazing filmmaker Bill Duke, is on as a producer.
Yes.
Very exciting things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Bill Duke and Marvin Jones, and you know, that was one of the things where we had to bar the door at a certain point because really exciting producers, and we'll probably make some announcements soon, but some other really exciting producers have been kind of talking to us. As of today, we're only a couple of weeks out of the Writers Guild strike, so a lot of people just couldn't have those conversations. Now we can, and so now it's a question of not of like, okay, Bill Duke and who else, but like Bill Duke and who are we going to say no to? Who are we going to say yes to? Who's going to come with us on our own, you know, planter? So, but it's exciting. It's exciting. It'll be 3 volumes. The first one will be released in comic book form, so we'll have 4 comic books coming out that will make the final volume. We're hoping to have stuff out in time for Black History Month next year in February. Not sure if we will make it because good stuff takes a little bit more time, and we want it to be great. So we'll be releasing those individually, and then the volume itself, and then after that the two bigger volumes. There's too much story to tell, right? The first one is pure heist, so excitement and fun, and then we get into his life as an entrepreneur, and then we get into his life as a congressman, and that was even super dramatic because it was as Reconstruction was ending and Jim Crow was beginning. So it was a time at the polls where people were being killed for standing in line to vote. And horses, you know, Klansmen on horses were racing up and down the street, burning houses and polling places and stuff to make sure that people didn't vote. And he still won. You know, he still won. And then after that, they tried to involve him in a bribery scandal, and he went to court and he won that, and he went back to his job. And like I say, died of old age. Amazing. And all the more reason why, you know, you need this story to kind of emphasize why we need, you know, history, why we need to learn all this stuff.
Watch One Detroit, Thursday at 7:30 p.m.
You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.